Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting the Ocean Highway and Port Authority of Nassau County for Wednesday, September 8th, 2021 at 6 p.m. We stand for the invocation and pledge. Father, Lord, we do thank you for our many blessings. We thank you for this great country that we live in. We pray now, Lord, that you would be with our leaders as they make decisions for our country. We pray for the servicemen and women who have lost their lives, and we just pray for the safekeeping of the ones that remain over there, and that we can all bring them all home. Lord, we pray for all the as you come up on this anniversary of 9/11. We just pray for the victims' families as they grieve at this time, and help us to move on, Lord, and that we continue to have a great country. We ask now that you would be with us, that you would give us wisdom and discernment in all that we do, and we ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance to the flag right now. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Roll call.
Commissioner Hill.
Here.
Commissioner Hanna.
Here.
Commissioner Franklin.
Here.
Vice Chairman Cole.
Here.
Chairman Fullwood.
Present.
Thank you.
All right, first thing, we have comments from the audience. First one up is Chris Ragucci. Chris?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Tonight, I thought it would be appropriate and an excellent time to introduce and hear from some of the employees.
Give us your address.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, 2962 Ferdinand Court, Fernandina Beach, Florida. The men and women of the Port of Fernandina, many of them are here tonight. We had to curtail some operations on the vessel so that they could be here, because I think it's important that their voices be heard, and they've actually been asking me that their voices be heard. They're really the reason that we exist. When we came into Fernandina 3.5 years ago, the head count was down to 35 hourly employees. It's now back up to 60. And really the only true gem that we felt we were acquiring was the people. You'll hear tonight some of the people have worked at the Port of Fernandina for over 30 years. Another group for more than 25 years. Many for more than 20 years. And the newbies are generally 10 years in here. So although we do have some new blood coming in, obviously, as we expand the workforce, the anchors, the supervisors, and the leaders are the men and women, and some of them are here tonight. You'll hear from. These were truly the unsung heroes, in my opinion, of the COVID pandemic. They were declared essential workers on day one. They came to work every single day at great peril to themselves and their own families. You'll recall there were months before we had vaccines available. Some of them, like Mr. Wojnarowski, who you'll hear from, got COVID, and his 3 daughters also got it. Some of our other workers didn't get it, but they were exposed to it through family relations, etc. It was a precarious time. Nassau Terminals never laid off a single person during the entire pandemic. We also never cut anyone down below 40 hours because we knew that their living depends on this port, and we were determined to tough it out. At the end of the day, we have to realize that the reason we all exist is because of the workers at the Port of Fernandina. Their hard work pays my salary, it pays all of your salaries. In fact, their hard work allows us to fund all of OPA's operations, period. And so I think it's important that people recognize that these are great Americans. They're good, hardworking people from diversified backgrounds. They work in harmony together in some of the toughest conditions. It's 120 degrees plus in the hold of the ship or an unair conditioned warehouse. And they're working 11-hour shifts with only an hour off for lunch. I've never seen anything like the work ethic that these folks have demonstrated. I'm incredibly proud of them. And I think we all should. And I think that as we hear their stories tonight, I hope that you realize that they rely on yes, the port operator, but we can only do so much. They rely on OPA and the commissioners to support and to defend them. And so with that, I'd like to, I think, Bill Wondrowski is the first one. Yep. So I'd like to hand it off to the next speaker.
I'll make the call.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Philip?
Thank you, Commissioner. Our Chairman, Commissioner. Sorry. My name is Philip Wondrowski, Chief Petty Officer, retired, 21 years in the Navy. So I've done my time to serve, to provide the freedoms that we all enjoy. I felt that it was important that I wanted to put a face to the port. I wanted to be able to show that all of the decisions and things that are made are not made for just a name. It's made for the people that are actually working at this port, the people that are putting in the hard work. I came here to say that, you know, we're providing for our families. The same thing anybody else would do. Provide for your family. I've got 3 daughters. This job has enabled me to provide for my daughters' college, for my eldest, putting my middle kid through right now. And I've got one more to go for that too. So I thank the port. The port has never been out to hurt anybody or do anything damaging to anyone. So I just got tired of hearing all of the negative rhetoric that goes along with it. Just tired of it. Just tired of it. We've got people that are native to Fernandina, working here 30 plus years. 30 plus years they've worked at this port. So why would anybody want to hurt me in my way of taking care of my family? That's what I want to know. I don't go out of my way to hurt anybody. I serve this country to ensure that everybody could take care of their families. So don't do this to me. Some of you might not even know me. I don't know half the people in here. My name is Bill Wondrowski, 315 North 2nd Street. Come visit me. I'm as transparent as they come. I'll tell you what you want to know, whether it's good or bad. But we have to work together, citizens, port alike. Let's work together. If there's problems, let's work through the problems. But I've only had one resident come to me and say anything to me. One. And I assured him that I would take care of anything he needed to be taken care of. It was in my abilities to do so. We worked through the COVID. We worked through everything, providing services that I don't think a lot of people even understand we provide. I'm sure everybody's got paper towels in their house. We saw it disappear off the shelves. Toilet paper, air filters, food. We provided relief for food for people that didn't have any of that. But we're always being drugged through the mud, whether it's social media, personal vendettas, whatever it may be. It needs to be dropped. It needs to be dropped. I don't do anything to anybody. I'm trying to take care of my family. I provided service to all of you for 21 years and sacrificed family time for that. So why are people trying to hurt me and my family?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Kevin Brown.
Commissioner, my name is Kevin Gerard Brown Sr. I reside at 86111 Fieldstone Drive, Bowie, Florida. I am a native. I was born at Humphrey Memorial Hospital, October 12, 1958, at Hospital Bingo. I grew up in Fernandina. I graduated Fernandina Beach High School, 1976. I'm also a United States Army veteran. I served my country. I pay taxes. I have property here in Fernandina, in Chester, and I have a home in Louisville. My mom and dad raised 6 children who all had high educations or were in military service. We have a lot of family around here in Fernandina Beach. Dr. Jeremy Coleman is a cousin of mine. Principal Puggy Coach Elwood Brown is my brother. I have a lot of family here in Fernandina Beach. who have the right to work and provide living wages with benefits to their families. Let me tell you about my coworkers. These young men and women back here who work hard in the heat of the day, in the sun, hot warehouses, in the cold, in the rain. I've been at the port over 31 years. I've been able to provide for my family, put kids through college, and I know I deserve every right to be here, to work here, provide for my family here, as these young men and women back here. I didn't just come down the road and find a friend, fall in love with it, move down the street from the port, and all of a sudden start having issues. The port is not the problem. If I build a house on Day Street, knowing it's the trailer, it's the tractor, it's the truck route to the port, live with it. If I build a house around the corner from the port, and I don't like the noise, I would be insane if I was to go and build a house next to a nightclub, then complain about the noise. That's insanity. We haven't asked nobody for anything but the opportunity to take care of our families, just as you have taken care of this. Like I said, I am a serviceman. I serve my time. And I have the right to take good care of my family and have a living wage with benefits here on the island I was born and raised on. Thank you very much.
Kevin's brother very well. I worked with him at the middle school for years.
Can I get my paper back? Is it already submitted?
The box.
Yeah.
Okay. I just didn't think so.
What is your address?
Yes.
My name is Crystal Ponsky. I live at 13,000 Doxton Bay, Jacksonville, Florida, 32218. I'm here to explain tonight how the port has impacted my life. I graduated in May of 2015 from Hilliard High with no direction and no motivation. In 2015 and 2016, I started off working as a temporary warehouse clerk with zero experience in the business. After 6 months of learning the ins and outs of the port, they saw something in me and hired me full time. After 5 years, I am now the warehouse logistics coordinator for Worldwide Terminals, and just being able to say that and remember where I started has made me so grateful and proud. The port gave me the opportunity to go from nothing to getting my own apartment, my own car, and even meeting some amazing people. I have been independent since I was 18 years old, and without the port of Fernandina, I wouldn't have any of this. This leads me to why I'm here tonight. There is a lot of resentment towards the port, and I can't help but wonder why. Being an employee here has changed my life for the good in so many ways. How can it be so bad? Some of the people who are Fernandina natives have worked here for 25, 30 plus years and have dedicated their lives to ensure the work gets done. We are the ones who work through COVID and continue to put ourselves at risk every single day to provide exceptional customer service. In closing, I would like to say that the port is more than just a shipping receiving facility. It is a place for people to better themselves and provide for their families. I would ask you, Opa, to take off the blindfold and finally see the faces of the people who put in the work and the people that you were meant to support and defend.
Thank you. I know this next gentleman very well. He was one of my students in middle school. Charles, come in. Listen, Johnny.
Good evening, my name is Charles Hutch. My address is 310 South 13th Street, Fernandina, Florida. I am a native. Born and raised in Fernandina Beach. I've been employed where I've done for 26 plus years. I've been through good and the bad with Worldwide Terminal. One thing I like about the port, they provide for me and my wife and my kids. Without them, I don't know what I'd be doing right now. All I ask is, I'm tired of all of the bad stuff we hear about the port, this and that. Guess what? All we're trying to do is provide for our family, earn a good living. You know, I understand there's a lot of stuff going on and everything, but we are the ones out there in the front line providing services in the COVID. We have to be shut down. All I'm asking is the commissioners and everybody just come by and see what we do. You'll be amazed. All I know is my dad worked at Ring for 15 years. My mom terminal bag for how so long. So with me being here all this time, I learned to love this place. I don't think I have a job at the port to this day. When I first built my house, is right where warehouse number 2 is at. Sold to the port. That's a good thing. But all I'm saying is, I don't understand why people just trying to make it like we bad people. We're not bad people. We're working people. You know, I remember when I was in 8th grade, we got no football team. When the coach forward, hey, we need a football team. He fought for it to get the football team back. And we got it. I'm saying, fight like that for us. You know what I'm saying? But the end, what I'm saying is, we're here to provide service for everybody. Don't take away my means of living. If I try to take away your means of living, what would you do? You'll fight back. Just be on our side and help us. Don't be against us, be for us. Thank you.
Next is Brendan Byron.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Oh, I'm sorry, my name is Bryn Byron. I'm from Bernardina Beach.
Address? Address?
1438 South Fletcher.
Thank you.
I'm here to request that you ask the Army Corps of Engineers to decommission the channel south of buoy number 3, which prevents the city of Bernardina Beach from extending its marina northward. It has no current or foreseeable future needs. It would cost in excess of $50 million to dredge to the 28 feet if permitted, or if permits could be obtained. It was last dredged in 1960. It was last used for ocean-going vessels in 1985. It was originally created to service the phosphate terminal, which no longer is present. It is my hope that this may promote more favorable relationships between the city of Bernardina Beach and OPA.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very well.
I'm going to decline at this time. Thank you.
Okay. All right, that's all the public comments I have. Any commissioners want to say anything? I would just like to say I thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight to say your piece. And notes have been taken. Thank you.
Also, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank the report workers for coming out. Like they say, this is where they make their living. This is not a retirement park, but they do furnish goods for all of us, you know. And like one of them said, if you move into a place, if you move into a nightclub next door to it, you shouldn't be complaining about it, there, you know. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming out.
I appreciate you guys coming out. You definitely have my support and understanding. I'm here with you guys trying to better the port for the long haul. I think you guys have done a lot to push the port forward. I thank you guys, honestly. You guys do hard work every day. People don't understand what goes into the operations, the sweat, the tears, the anger, the blood that you pour into that. And yet they want to pushing me out further and further every day. I get it. My dad worked for all life. Anyway, I thank you guys for coming. I really do.
Yes, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I wanted to let you have the last first. And then you let have the next one. So I wanted to respond to each of you individually because I saw that you were directing me individually with some of your comments. Mr. Warnowski, my maiden name is Sovinsky, and so I feel like I have like some rehearsal, but my father was first generation that came over from Germany when he was 19 years old and didn't speak any English and had no money. And I grew up in a restaurant, and so I really appreciate the value of hard work. Thank you for your service to our country, and your jobs and your livelihood are the first thing that I think about every day, and the last thing I think about at night. I share that with the rest of the board. Kevin, I love the fact that you shared about being born at Humphreys Memorial Hospital. My husband loves to tell people that he was born at the hospital on 14th Street. I know that doesn't give me any street cred, but in the time that I've been here, I'm really respectful of the people that have spent their whole lives here, and I recognize that newcomers often think they know something about how things should be run. Everyone wants to change things as soon as they arrive here, but in my campaign and as a commissioner, I really made a point to try to connect with people at the port, some of your fellow coworkers and friends of my husband's, and I connected with them individually to find out what their concerns are, your concerns and my concerns. Krista, the fact that you have done what you've done and lived on your own since you were 18, I did that too. I worked my way through school, and if you ever want to run for office, I would encourage you to do so. Would love to talk to you at some point. Charles and Bren, I know you have an issue with the attenuator, but I don't want to take too much time. But Charles, I would love to come and see what you do personally at the port. We had a request to do that somehow that didn't connect, but I would accept your personal invitation. Would love to come to the port. And then Bren, I think the rest of the board will address the concerns about the attenuator. Some person we've heard that. I know that we did file the bill and the bill was passed, but I think that there's an executing portion of that that has to basically be enacted into an executed law. And so I think there's just an additional step that has to be taken, but I welcome to hear the operational concerns of the port, because as you just heard, those are really first and foremost to us as a board. Thank you, each of you.
Thank you. What I'd like to say is, first of all, I'm a native here also. I was born and raised here. Kevin, I was born in that same hospital a few years before you. That's where I was from. Watch out, make comments about my age. I've always been someone that likes to give back to the community that raised me and has done so much for me. Being a school teacher for almost 30 years, I tried to give back in that way. I'm a veteran, Vietnam veteran, and I gave to my country. And when I came back, I wanted to give to my community. So I got my education and started teaching school. After that, when I was about to retire, I said, you know, what can I do now? I don't want to just sit around and do nothing. So I had the opportunity to run for this position. And I said, oh, that's a great opportunity because I can still give to the community and still help work, still help people. And that's what I think I've done. And I will continue to do that. If you read the paper, you know, I take a lot of flack. I take a lot of heat, especially through editorials. I get a lot of editorials written about me and what we're doing here. But I can assure you, this board is not your enemy. We're here to support you, and we're going to do our utmost to make sure the board continues to grow. And anytime you want to talk to me, and I've talked to some of you on the phone, I've been to the port to talk to somebody. Anytime you want to talk to any of us, all you got to do is pick up the phone and call us. And we will be back at the port talking to you. And we appreciate you being here and giving us your input. We know how much that port means to you and how much this job means. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure it continues and it continues to grow. We have a lot of people out there that don't want to see that. And I know you know who they are and what their agenda is. So be strong. We'll work hard to make sure we do the right thing for you. Thank you. All right. Let's move on with the approval of the minutes. Now you can stay as long as you like. You don't have to leave. If you want to hear what goes on the rest of the evening, that's fine with us. Approval of minutes for August 11th and August 28th. You want to take them together or? Motion been made to approve the minutes for August 11th for the monthly meeting and August 28th for the special meeting. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, the year financial report. Yeah, you're right there.
All right. Rosanna should have passed out we'll start with the monthly report from the treasurer's report. Just shows the spending for August and year to date. Obviously, we have one more month to go in the fiscal year. Fiscal year ends September 30th. So there's just one more month to go. Everything's on track. Our spending is as expected. So no surprises or anything like that. So next page obviously is Customs House. Again, Customs House, electricity, cleaning. That's about all that goes on there. And then the balances in the accounts. We've had to transfer another 20,000 out of the. So we transferred another 20,000 out of the money market.
I'm sorry, 30,000.
30,000 out of the money market into the checking account to pay as anticipated. And as discussed in previous meetings, and as we passed the budget amendment at the last meeting. Yeah, attorney fees, yes. Any questions about the monthly report? So the next item is we have a resolution to approve the budget as we discussed, and it has been amended at the budget workshop that we had, the meeting minutes that you just approved. So attached is the actual resolution and the 2021-22 operating budget for the port, broken up into the port operations, Customs House, port security, and the construction and maintenance account. So that's a resolution to adopt the budget 2021-22.
It's the resolution. It's resolution number 2021-006.
Yes, 6. Housing workforce funding is still under discussion.
Motion been made to approve the budget number 2021-006, the resolution. Any discussion?
No, so we would have to amend the budget once we know what we're going to spend the ARPA funds on and things like that. So, and how much we'll have.
So you don't have budgeted the RSH now?
No, not in the budget until we decide what we're going to do with the ARPA funds. We don't have the money to match. Obviously, the ARPA funds allow us to match, but we don't have the money to match for the RSH funding at this point.
And Patrick will talk to us about that later. Also, we're going to make some adjustments to the cleaning service, but we'll talk about that in the appropriate time.
So that's included in here.
not for the new one.
The one you sent me, the email, I changed the contract
Oh,
amount.
you did?
As requested, I changed the contract amount to 2,700, I think,
Yeah.
30.
3360.
Yeah.
All right,
I did make that change, yes.
all right, well, I guess we need to go ahead and talk about this.
On mine, it's got 3360. So let's wait till we get to,
Well, we're gonna approve the budget.
No,
That's
so-
in the budget.
So the last column, I think if you're looking at proposed budget version 4, the last column is 2,700 for cleaning services.
Right.
Down from 3,360, which was the 2021 budget.
Let me open this discussion up and tell you why I'm gonna have it. We have had a problem in the last several weeks with the company that's cleaning the Customs House. They're not showing up. And Customs House not been cleaned in what, 3 weeks? 3 weeks. They did adjust the amount. However, it's been told to me by Customs and Border that people really didn't want to do it anymore. We have a contract with them, and the contract says you have to give 60 days notice to terminate the contract, but I'm wondering, because they have not fulfilled the contract, can we do something else better?
I haven't seen that contract, so take a look at it. And see what it requires, but if they've not performed on the language of the contract, then we have an option there, but I've not seen that document.
You want to look at it? That's the only contract we have with them. The only way it's worded. Yes.
Pierre, was that the only change that we made is the 2,700?
We put everything else back in there, right? We were taking out
No,
what?
so when you say put it back in there, Nassau Economic Development Board still at $1,000. So I didn't change it until, we can always amend the budget
Yeah.
based on the grant funds. So right now, this is not anticipating any grant funds at this point.
Right.
We can always amend this budget to take those into account, but at this point, again, until we actually have the funds in hand, we sign the agreement, then we can amend the budget to whatever we want to be.
Right, so the amounts you have in here are the ones we discussed at the budget meeting that we were gonna reduce.
Right.
Okay, so all that's been reduced.
Right.
So
So essentially balances the
but we
budget.
need to adopt the budget, and we can always, like you said, amend it.
We need to adopt the budget because obviously the budget year starts October 1st.
Right.
So we need to go ahead and adopt the budget. And again, once we know what the grant funds are and what we want to spend it on, we can amend the budget to what we want to do.
Right, and we'll do that. Let me go over the cleaning service budget. Currently, we pay $305 a month for cleaning service. And that's $36.60 a year. The proposed cost with the new service proposal from Amelia Building Maintenance is $225 a month. That's a savings of $80 a month. And savings of $1,260 a year. I don't, we need to work on saving money, and that's one way to do it. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I was in charge of this Customs House, and I've got the expense from quite a bit since I've been in. We do have a contract with these people. Like Patrick says, it doesn't have an expiration date on it. But they did miss 3 weeks. The company was not aware of it. When it was brought up to my attention, I checked on it, and I checked with the company, and at the time that when they did, they issued us credit and said that this would not be happening again. You know, and I don't have a problem with changing, but again, we need to be fair about it and give them notice of whatever. We discussed this at the meeting on the 23rd, and I'm all for saving money, but again, we've been through cleaning people trying to get it done several times during the 12 years I've been here. So, but I think we need to stick with what we got to this time, or if we're required to give them a 60-day notice, we could give them a 60-day notice, written notice, and then start it.
I think that's probably what we need to do is give them a 60-day notice.
There's no end. It looks like the first one was signed in January of 19 and had a termination date of a month later.
Yeah.
And then this other page commences on March of 2019 and there's no end date. So,
Right.
So if your direction is to give a 60-day notice, we'll get that out.
I'd like,
If it's necessary. If not, then if we can just continue service immediately and start with a new company.
we're gonna have to come back if we agree to give them 60 days and amend the budget to pay for the next 2 months. Correct?
Yes,
Yes, okay.
the new budget only includes the $225 a month.
Let's approve the budget and we'll let them decide if they want the 60 days notice, if they want to withdraw. And then we'll formally hire the other company. But I just think $1,200 a year in savings is something we need to look at.
Additional item. Talking about that.
Do the budget?
About budget.
Okay, let's finish this. Is that agreed with everybody? Okay. Right, what's your?
So these are items that I did bring up at the budget meeting, but I know that members of the public were not present at that meeting, or at least not as many. And so I wanted to just revisit those items so that we could discuss them. So the one is the salaries, which I continue to advocate for $500 for commissioner reduction.
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully ask you to stop that conversation. We ended that in our last budget meeting and said that we would not discuss that anymore.
Well, we can take a vote on not discussing that item.
Yes, we did, Commander.
I think we did. We're not going to discuss salaries. Salaries are set. That's what I'm keeping. If everybody agrees to that.
Well, and if I might just add that would be just the payroll taxes alone on that item would be $2,800. It would be a $30,000 reduction in our budget.
Commissioner, you're out of order.
We should be adopting a budget that our revenues support.
We have the money to cover the budget. Is that correct? Yeah. That's correct.
I also raised the question at that meeting about the pilot payment in the last 2 years as to why that item is not included. And I know that that's subject to litigation, but I know that under the operating agreement, those funds were supposed to be removed to OPA. So I raised that issue, but I'm not sure that I got a clear answer on, whether that should appear.
How that works is when we were paying that payment, that pilot payment, which is in litigation now, so we can't discuss a lot about it. We paid the city, and then the port operator refunded that money to us. Under the operating agreement, they're supposed to pay it after we pay it. They're supposed to refund the money to us after we pay it. Is that what you understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's why it's not in the budget, because it's in litigation right now. We offered a settlement, as I said before, and they didn't accept it. So they went to litigation, they decided they wanted to sue us. So after the litigation, we'll determine what we need to do. If we need to pay it, we'll pay it. It's up to the courts. Any other questions about the budget? Okay. All right, all in favor of adopting the budget, signify by saying aye. All opposed, no.
So can I clarify this, Commissioner Hill, you made the motion that we adopt the budget, but now you're voting no against it.
That's not a violation of Robert's
It's
rules.
not,
It's
no,
just to
I'm just
open the
asking.
discussion.
I'm clarifying.
It's to open the discussion.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Here, is that all you got?
That's all I have.
All right. Let's go ahead and do the report of turnout. I got something in here that I want to move up in the agenda, but I'll let our attorney talk first. Well, actually, you want to wait?
It's your meeting, sir.
It's actually under new business. Our bonding agent is here tonight. She came all the way up from St. Petersburg. And she brought somebody with her. And I'd like for them to do their presentation. They're going to give us a new presentation about our bonding capabilities. And I'm very interested to hear this. Julie, you guys can come forward about that. And I believe we have some slides or something.
Thank you.
Also with Julie is Joe Stanton. Joe has been here before also. Julie's been here before. They did the last presentation. Glad to have you guys back. Thanks for traveling that far to come up and do this. We really need your help, hopefully. And also, I'd like to say that Sherry Mitchell from the Nassau County Economic Development Board is here to listen also. And Sherry, I will offer you an opportunity to speak after this if you'd like. Okay, go ahead, guys.
Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. And it's our understanding that the court has a lot of abilities under statutory.
Pull the microphone a little bit closer.
Yes, a lot of statutory ability to assist with economic development. So we'll just provide an overview of that, and then you please ask any questions as we go along. So what is a municipal bond? It is a debt instrument that's typically used by local governments to borrow funds for a project. The debt is repaid by the pledged security for the revenues. Florida governments typically issue revenue bonds secured by taxes or project revenues. And they can be issued as either tax exempt or taxable securities.
So bonds issued by municipalities really fall into two broad categories. One is governmental purpose bonds. It's like a city or county that might issue bonds for the city hall complex or for sidewalks or roads or water and wastewater facilities. Another specialized category is called private activity bonds. And those are certain activities that have tax favorable treatment under the Internal Revenue Code. And that's going to be kind of the focus of our presentation to you, because in the context of economic development at the port, there may be certain activities that qualify for tax exempt financing, which is a benefit to these underlying borrowers that may be coming to you looking for economic development assistance. And port's role in that is to serve as an issuer, but not an issuer who's responsible for the obligations. Just simply, they have to serve the function of being the issuer of bonds, because part of the basis of being tax exempt is you have to have a these industrial development bonds that we're presenting to you on the slide. It is a way to finance economic development projects. There are a couple different ways that these bonds are sold. Sometimes, depending on the size of the project, you may have an underwriting firm come in and do a offering to the public, such as the way that we actually did the terminal financing. That was a sale to the investment investors. And another alternative way, a lot of times maybe used with a little bit smaller transactions, is a bank private placement. That's where the bonds get sold directly to the bank who may purchase the bonds altogether. As the slide indicates, when the bonds get issued, you take the proceeds, you put them in a project fund, and they get used to finance whatever project you're financing. And in the case of industrial development bonds, the underlying borrowers who are seeking the financing or whose projects benefiting from the bond proceeds, they're the ones responsible for paying. The Port Authority wouldn't be responsible for repaying the bonds. They're simply serving as a conduit. The underlying borrowers repay the debt. And then again, it's usually the bonds are used to finance facility construction and related costs. And as the slide indicates, it's a very advantageous rate for most borrowers because it's lower than what they can usually get a traditional bank loan for other conventional financing for. So it's a real benefit to the borrowers to have the Port Authority serve as a conduit issuer.
Sure, I think you touched on those aspects of this slide. One important aspect is that a company that comes to you for you to be the conduit issue for them to borrow through you, they have to be credit worthy on their own. Issuing through you does not provide them with any credit enhancement for the project, and the company has to stand on its own. Oftentimes they will bring their own investors, or the project team, such as Joe and I, can assist with finding banks or underwriters or investors to help them through the process, but they have to stand on their own, and that's typically the largest challenge with economic development.
Excuse me, Ms. Julie, can you speak up? I have somebody watching the live stream. They can't hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
An overview of the process. So the initial steps are putting the team together, staff, legal counsel, developing the plan of finance, the development of the legal documents, having the board and TEFRA approval, which is approval through the state, interfacing with the public market, the actual sale of the bonds or pricing of the bank loan, and then you have pre-closing and closing requirements. And then after closing, there are certain obligations that the borrower has to undertake to either ensure that the tax exempt proceeds are used properly, and also to provide continuing disclosure to the marketplace and to investors.
Just a couple points there. You can see by that slide is it does take a little bit of time to go through this process. As you can see, it's usually a several months process to go through, and there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of documents that usually are involved in the transaction.
So the initial part of the finance team, of course, is the staff and finance, your legal counsel, the administration, and the board as the ultimate approving body. And the role of staff is to protect public interests, be the liaison with the board members, to assist with the understanding of the project, and the liaison with the borrower throughout the process. And then the borrower, of course, would be the company, the project representative coming to you for the financing.
Another part of the finance team, bond counsel, that was the role in which our firm served on the financing for your operator. And in the case of any of these other financings, the bond counsel is responsible for delivering an opinion based on the Internal Revenue Code that the project qualifies for tax exemption. We would deliver the opinion not only for the benefit of the borrower whose project's being financed, but it would also be an opinion that gets issued to the Port Authority that the Port Authority has the ability to rely on. We obviously have to go through a diligence process to come up, reach that opinion, and there are tax certifications that will be required. We also would work with the finance team on structuring the data, making sure that the underlying legal documents are consistent with the intended structure.
Yes, and the financial advisor is the role that our firm played. We act as your fiduciary, working on your behalf throughout the financing process, helping to advise you on the project's viability, the risks involved. And while it's not your obligation, not financial obligation, there can be headline risks where a project goes through you and has difficulties. We all know that there's press risks no matter what we've been discussing earlier tonight. And to assist with the document review and negotiation and pricing.
Another finance team member that's usually important is the underwriter disclosure counsel. You'll have that if you have a bond financing that involves a sale to investors through an offering document. And there are requirements that go with it. These are governed by federal securities laws that have certain requirements that dictate what needs to go into your offering document. And there usually is, with these financings, an obligation to continue to provide information over the life of the bond issue. So that's the role of the Underwriters Counsel Disclosure Council, to work on those types of activities. There's also an underwriter, and I'll let Julie.
Sure, and the underwriter serves as the liaison between the borrower and investors, and they will market the bonds to investors and then purchase any unsold bonds and handle that risk on behalf of the borrower. And then, of course, you have the lender. In that case, it would be a bank, or it could be a private investor who purchases the loan directly. Oftentimes, you'll have a consulting engineer going through certain environmental aspects of the transaction, construction estimating, providing information on the timing and any construction risks involved, financial feasibility consultant who provides forecasts and assists with vetting the viability of the project. And they are an independent third-party analysis that's very important with project financings to provide comfort to investors or to lenders. And then in some cases, with a more creditworthy or stronger, larger type of company or guarantee, you would have a rating involved, and the rating agencies provide an independent review of the credit for investors, which helps to enhance the sale of the bonds if it's possible to obtain a rating. So in developing the finance plan, it depends on the type of the project, the strength and stability of the revenues that can be pledged, whether you have a very strong parent company that can provide a guarantee, and that credit support, which again would come from the borrower and not from the authority.
I'll just make one point on projects, just so that you're aware. Your statute is extremely broad in terms of the types of projects that you can finance. It's really almost anything under the sun in relation to the port activities. It's a very, very broad statutory provision. So there's almost no kind of economic dialogue project that probably doesn't fall within your purview as an authority or your ability to do. The question would be whether all the activities that are in that statute still qualify for federal tax exemption. That list is much more limited than the broader list of your statute.
The financings can also always be taxable, which would have a higher interest rate, but it still can offer benefits compared to going through a traditional lender where you could have a longer term, let's say up to 30-year financing and 100% of the project costs.
So I just touched on the types of projects to be financed. So it's again a broad category. When you start involving looking at it from a tax exempt perspective, you really need to focus more on the capital type expenditures. So they're not really operating expenses. There are more capital expenditures. So construction of buildings or refurbishing buildings, those types of things are the things that you really look to for financing. The other thing is, the important thing is creation of jobs or retention of jobs. If the project's not done, that's always that's kind of a public purpose issue for a board like OPA. You want to kind of establish the fact that there's a public purpose and that economic development is part of the approval of the project. And then you can see by the slide the types of things that you look to: land acquisition, new construction, renovation, or purchasing equipment and machinery. We did a lot of that in the financing for the terminal. We had machinery equipment, we had renovations, and we also had some construction going on. So we covered a lot of those bases on the most recent financing. Limitations. It is the Internal Revenue Code, and the Treasury Department does like to keep every tax dollar they can, so they put some limitations in to make sure that not everybody can access the tax exempt markets. And typically, if you're looking at manufacturing activities at the port, there are limitations. It's really geared towards smaller manufacturers at the port. So $10 million or less is the limit on the borrowing, and there are limitations on capital improvements as well within a 6-year period. And there are also requirements that you spend almost all the proceeds on the project. You're not 95% or more have to be spent for the project. So when you develop these projects, you need to make sure that your proceeds are matching up with your construction budget. There are limits on the amount of issuance costs that can be financed with these bonds, only 2%. And then there are non-capital expenses like 3% can be used for things like that. So those are some of the code requirements that apply to these types of finances. So the 10 million limit, again, I think I've covered most of the stuff here. That 6-year period for capital expenditures. They are, again, capital expenditures, and there is a nationwide cap of 40 million, depending on who comes to support seeking financing. That may be something that applies in particular instances. Another type of category, those were industrial development bonds that we've been talking about. There is another Internal Revenue Code provision, section 142A of the Internal Revenue Code, that lists a lot of quasi-governmental activities that are allowed to benefit from tax exemption. One of them is for docks and wharves. So they do allow certain types of facilities to be financed on a tax exempt basis that might not otherwise qualify, because it is related to a dock and wharves. In particular, a big one is storage facilities directly related to port operations. If it were a storage facility out in the middle of the highway for Amazon, they do not qualify for tax exempt financing. But because these are storage facilities related to port operations, those qualify for, can qualify for tax exempt financing. So there are certain types of private facilities that don't qualify, and I've kind of listed them on the schedule on the slide. And there are special rules that apply for leases and management contracts that you have to perform diligence on to make sure that they comply with the requirements of the Internal Revenue Code.
So the IPB process would be making the application with the port. There's a credit approval process with the underwriter, the investor lender, the TEFRA process with the state, construction review and any environmental testing, in the bond loan process that we went over. And the whole process can take approximately 2 to 3 months, depending on what stage of the planning, zoning, construction that the contract is in. And if there's going to be a private activity request, which is a tax exempt bonds, the state of Florida has certain allocation. The key is to make that request early in the beginning of the calendar year. And IDB financings, especially with the bond issue, can have higher issuance costs, but the tax exempt interest rates can provide significant economic savings compared to a conventional loan.
Yeah, just 2 points on that. Private activity allocation. The state has a set aside for manufacturing projects that's in place through November 15th of the year. So if you apply for allocation by November 15th of the year, then you have to use it by the end of the year. But after November 15th, any monies that are in that allocation pool towards manufacturing get turned back to a different state pool. And then secondly, on the issuance costs, you really look to longer term assets to finance tax exempt because it wouldn't make sense to short-term finance with the added cost. It's really more longer term capital assets that you're trying to finance.
So we mentioned this, the type of the debt that can be issued for bonds, it can be up to 30-year fixed rate. Bank loans typically have a shorter term, maybe up to 15, perhaps sometimes 17 years. Tax exempt or taxable, both can provide economic benefit compared to conventional bank financings, just going out to a regular commercial lender. The structure is determined by the borrower. They're coming to you just as a pass-through issuer. And again, their ability to obtain ratings and provide credit enhancement, it's critical to making the financing feasible. Just to touch a couple aspects of the current market focus, the economic plans, the infrastructure bills that are out there are a key focus for investors. There could be additional abilities for infrastructure spending and borrowing that could potentially enhance your abilities with additional private activity bonds, increasing the amount of available funds. And there would be other projects that could be available in surface transportation, but it's more for rail. But it's a big aspect for the market, and also having the ability to advance refund tax exempt bonds is something that the market is really focused on. And then another area for investors right now is, of course, the COVID, and that's creating some volatility. Somewhat sadly, or in the bond market, volatility is typically good for reducing rates because investors have seek a flight to quality, typically away from equities and into more of the safe loan type products. We have seen interest rates remain very low over the past year or so after the initial shock of COVID, which you see here. These are just some interest rate charts that shows what happened in March of 2020 when the market froze. Rates have since come back down. This shows the tax exempt index and the treasury index for 5, 10, and 30 years. And so you see, while we had that initial spike in interest rates and freezing of the market, rates have come back down and they're still very low from a historical level. So it remains an ideal time. This is a look over the past 12 years or so, and interest rates are close to the new historic lows that were established earlier this year and prior to that in September of 2020.
Next, we just wanted to touch on the fact that the financing involves, it's a heavily intensive process, but there are certain documents that are important to the Port Authority. The first one on that list, the bond resolution of indenture, is something that the Port Authority be a party to. And it is really, describes the bonds, the structure of the bonds. And it is really an arrangement for the bondholders. And a couple things, as a conduit issuer in that context, while you would be the issuer of the bonds, it would be very clear that you're not financially responsible for repayment of the bonds, and it's solely an obligation. So they're called limited obligations of this authority. But you are entering into an arrangement with bondholders, and there are certain obligations that you would have as the issuer of the bonds. The second document there, again, is a document the authority would be a party to. It's called a loan agreement, and that is where you're agreeing to take the proceeds of the bonds that you're issuing and loan them to whoever the underlying borrower is for that particular project. And the borrower is in turn agreeing to repay you or repay the bonds themselves. And typically it gets structured in a way where the authority issue the bonds and then they kind of step aside, and it's an arrangement that goes directly between the borrower and the investor, or the borrower and the bank, depending on the structure. The official statement, again, is a document that is the authority's document, even though it will primarily have material and information about the borrower. It is the document that gets approved by this authority board if there's an offering statement that's used. It's driven very much by federal securities laws. Last document here is a bond purchase agreement, and that is the document that gets entered into, again, by the authority, be something the authority approved the form of. And it is an agreement between the issuer and the underwriter. And if it's a conduit issuer, it also include the borrower. And they would all agree on the underwriter under the obligation to purchase the bonds based on certain conditions being satisfied. And you as issuer would agree to sell the bonds to that underwriter. And it doesn't really get executed until there's a pricing of the transaction. And again, as we described, kind of the basic terms of the slide. Continuing disclosure agreement, again, yet another document that the authority would be a party to usually. Also, the borrowers be a party to it, they're the primarily responsible party. And again, this is an obligation that's driven by applicable securities laws, and it simply requires the borrower to provide updates on information that they give to the marketplace. So the marketplace has a sense of what's happening with the project, major changes to the project that occur. There's a listing of specific events that have to be disclosed to the public. And it's an obligation that the underwriters will insist upon, because they in turn have an obligation for securities laws to get that agreement in place.
Just a quick update on how the bonds are actually priced. Once all of this documentation is prepared, there will be a day that will be established where the bonds are officially marketed to investors, and typically that takes about 2 to 3 hours, and orders are placed. They receive orders from investors, could be someone like a large institutional fund, like a Franklin Templeton or Fidelity or State Farm, Nuveen, could be individual retail investors, depending on the creditworthiness of the project and how appropriate it is for individual investors to participate. And that pricing can be adjusted based on the demand that's received, and it's typically finalized by, let's say, noon or so that day. And that's when the actual interest rates are set, and they remain fixed for the fixed rate type of financing, which is typical for the final term of the financing, which could be up to 30 years. And closing can occur usually about 2 weeks after pricing. And the process can take 2 to 3 months from start to finish. It's once you get to that aspect, you're pretty home free. After your pricing, the documents typically would take about 2 to 3 weeks to finalize, and then on the day of closing, the monies are wired and you're done.
This slide goes over some post-closing requirements that apply to these types of financings, and they really, in general, focus on certain requirements to make sure that there are adequate revenues to repay the bonds, and that there are certain prohibitions in place that, again, don't restrict the ability to repay the bonds. So the rate covenant would be that there needs to be sufficient revenues generated on the project to not only satisfy debt service, but to create a cushion to pay amounts over and above in case negative economic conditions exist. There are limits on what can be invested, what you can invest proceeds in, or project funds in, or debt service funds in. There are restrictions on sales of the assets, and there are also usually requirements for insurance on the project in case there is a act of God that occurs that affects the project. The next big item there are arbitrage, again, that's tax driven, the internal revenue code. And in general, you're not allowed to borrow money at a tax exempt rate and that's at a rate that exceeds your tax exempt rate. That's called arbitrage. And while it'd be nice for you as an individual to earn that arbitrage, the Treasury takes a dim view of us doing that. So, I think I've covered this. This is continued disclosure. Again, that continued disclosure agreement would be something that the board would approve. And again, it's an obligation to provide ongoing information during the term of the bonds so that the investment, the marketplace is kept aware of what's happening with the project.
Any questions?
Julie and Joe, thank y'all so much for coming out tonight and the presentation. Answering a lot of questions that I've had in the past. So moving forward, you had one slide that said limitations on IDB financing, maximum amount is $10 million, and then parentheses manufacturing. Are there other areas? What about distribution or transportation? Do they fall in that same category?
No, the 10 million cap is specifically for manufacturing. So a manufacturing project would be subject to that 10 million finance. But if you have storage or something that's specifically related to port activities, that type of limit wouldn't necessarily apply. But something I would caution you on any project that gets brought before the board as a potential candidate for taxes and financing of any kind. You really have to look at it on a case-by-case basis to see what provisions or internal revenue code would apply to the transaction and what tax limitations, if any, apply if we're trying to finance on a tax basis. This is kind of a generic overview of financing, but there are a lot of different categories of taxes and projects that are out there. But I would say that this is a good tool for this authority to have in its toolbox to provide through the kind of issuance process, tax exempt financing for projects that may come before the board. It gives them an opportunity to finance it at an advantageous rate if their credit is said. So it's quite a process. And we are here to, we're available to this board for questions should something come up. And we're certainly available to you and answer any questions that you might have as projects come before.
Any type of project, please reach out to us and have a call with the potential borrower and determine if it's something that might be able to go through you all. And if not, then we can suggest other alternatives that might be able to assist them.
Is there a minimum amount for bonds?
There isn't, but in general, given the fact that it's a document intensive process and kind of expensive to do a bond issuance, it's the smaller transactions, unless it's a direct placement and very simplified. It's very difficult to do taxes and financing for smaller projects. I think we have to be multiple millions of dollars usually to really for it to make sense.
For a bank loan type project, say 2 to 3 million would be a smaller amount that's feasible.
Listed a $40 million cap nationwide. Is that applied to the issuer or to the borrower?
It would apply to if you're the issuer, it would be an issuer for that particular borrower. So it's a borrower-based limitation.
And then this might be for Pierre or from to the board. The last time that OPA did a kind of bond issuance, we have a total of the staff and other support costs that we committed. Ballpark to that. I know it's a 60-day look back for those costs, but
Lots of the legal fees were paid by the bond. So we received a $50,000 flat fee. And we had a cursory review of the documents. Obviously, the lawyer was much more involved. And as I said, those fees were paid directly from the bond. As far as the other staff, as I said, we saw lots of documents, but obviously we relied on professionals to make sure those documents were accurate. So the staff, other than, as I said, the lawyer who was being paid separately by the bond issuance, to do those reviews and things like that. Didn't spend a lot of time in the detail of it.
But the other legal fees and issuing fees were about $180,000, roughly.
So the way that the financing occurred, one of the slides also indicated you can use up to 2% of the proceeds of bonds that the issuance cost. And that's what happened in the most recent transaction. So the cost of issuing the bonds and the professional fees were built into the financing itself. And the proceeds of the bonds went to pay those financial fees. The authority did not come out of pocket. In fact, the authority received an issuance fee of $50,000 to serve as a conduit issuer. So the borrower ultimately became responsible for the cost of issuance.
That's consistent with what I have found. So, I was just curious about how much support staff costs, not only for OPA, but just overall. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
The issuance of bonds to be tax exempt, the bond or the business has to fall within the guidelines of what the Port Authority exists for.
If the Port Authority is going to serve as the issuer of the bonds, then the Port Authority has to, from the state law perspective, have the ability to finance the type of project that is applying to. If the project falls outside the purview of the Port Authority, because for some reason it doesn't fall within its statutory rights, then there are other conduit issuers in the state that may have the ability to serve as a conduit issuer in that instance. So it just depends on the facts and circumstances. But as I said, Chairman, the Port Authority has probably one of the broadest project descriptions that I've ever seen in the statute in terms of what this authority has the ability to do, as long as you can establish a relationship to the activities of the port that occur.
Right. So if someone wanted to come in and build, just hypothetically, a $10 million hotel, that would not be tax exempt because it does not benefit the purpose of the authority.
Surprisingly enough, your statute is broad enough to allow you to approve the issuance of bonds for that type of project, but the Internal Revenue Code would then step in and they don't, that type of activity would qualify for taxes and financing, but theoretically, you could issue the bonds for the project, it would just be a taxable bond.
Right, taxable, yeah, that's what I'm going to ask. Okay. Any other questions? Patrick, you got anything? Nothing? Thank you so very much, Bill and Julie. Appreciate you coming up and explaining all this to us again. I know there were some changes from the last time, but it looks pretty cut and dry to me. That's what I remember, but hopefully we're going to be reaching out to you in the near future. I'm going to ask Sherry to come up if you want to come up and say something. This is Sherry Mitchell. She's the acting director of the NCEDD. She is the director, I'm sorry, of the NCEDD Nassau County Economic Development Board. So,
just want to say thank you to the chairman and the board members for your time. And,
thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the invite for the meeting this evening. I wanted to, first of all, start out by thanking you for supporting the NCEDB. We really appreciate that. And also, while I'm up here, I want to commend all the workers for what, not only being here, but for what you do and for that long. I didn't realize how many people were employed that long at the port, so that's good. And this is perfect because I'm sitting here thinking of a project that we have discussed, and I did have one question. If we have a prospect that's looking at an area, manufacturer, small, fits in that category size-wise, and they are receiving incentive, like a state incentive, would they still be eligible for this type of bond?
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah. Sorry.
So it's likely that they would qualify for the type of tax financing, but again, it's a diligence process you have to go through. You have to look at their capital expenditures over a 6-year period. And there are specific limitations on what you can use bond proceeds for in the manufacturing facility. So there are certain percentages that have to be on direct manufacturing, certain percentages have to go to, can go to ancillary facilities like office space. There's a lot of detailed rules that apply, but it's a process that you can go, diligence process we can go through. And the other important aspect is it's not a grant of monies to these borrowers. It's of them actually borrowing. It's like them going to a bank and borrowing money. They have to be creditworthy to pay it back. So that's a key aspect that a lot of, when they hear the word bonds, they think it's free money, but it's not free money. There's a payment obligation that occurs every month that you got to make payments of principal and interest on. So that's an important factor for those manufacturers to keep in mind.
Bill, while you're up here, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but if we're a conduit of bond issuer, our money comes right off the top of that bond, is that correct?
That's right. So if you're serving as a conduit issuer, you're charging an issuance fee at closing, that money gets wired to your account right up front. So that's one of the first wires that would go out at closing would be your issuance fee. Any other professional fees would also go out, and there's a net amount left over that goes in the project account to fund the project.
And are there any fees that we would have to pay out of that?
No, usually, again, the obligations all fall on the underlying borrower to make all the payments of the other fees, and it gets built into the cost of the financing. If the cost of the financing exceeds the 2% limit, then the borrower has to come at closing with a check for whatever the excess amount is. That's the way it works.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
If you want me to give a update on NCEDB.
Please.
Okay. We are in the home stretch of finalizing our strategic plan. We have been working on this for well over a year now. And within that, we actually finally have a full staff, so that makes all the difference in the world. We'll be reporting that at the end of this fiscal year. We'll be able to roll that out. We did a preview of it at earlier board meeting this month. I wanted to talk about 3 hot prospects that keep circulating around Nassau County. One's for Wildlife at Commerce Park, one's for Crawford Diamond, and the third one is out there at 301 Bryceville, Otis Road in Bryceville. That one is going to be, they're all manufacturers, all under the employee 70 to 100, the shingles manufacturer company. Mockingbird is one that keeps revisiting the Crawford Diamond. And I've been back and forth with the county. They are requesting further road improvements. Everybody's on the same page between DOT, the county, FPL, us, and the prospect. They've narrowed their search down, and it looks like they're choosing, and nothing's in writing. They're waiting for me to give them a promissory note on further improvements, and so we're not ready to do that just yet. But that one did come down to Duval County and Nassau County, and they have been all around the state for the past year. That, and then we've got one looking at over at Wildlife Commerce Park. Have not seen a lot of activity or interest over there. A few small manufacturers. Unfortunately, the one that we really felt that was Project Panther, that they had come back like 5 times, and we did a residential tour from the west side of the county all the way to the island. And it turns out that we found out they have unfortunately chosen Texas over Nassau County due to they had infrastructure already and their incentives were off the chart. People that offer land, we don't do that here. And so I know that FPL did go back and forth and negotiated quite a bit on lowering rates. But it was, at the end of the day, it was a no-go. But, you know, we still stay active. We still have a lot of folks looking out here, different areas. And it's nice to see that it's other areas throughout the entire county besides just Crawford Diamond and Wildlife. So with any of that, you guys have any questions, I'll be sure that you guys, what we have generated is a prospect list. So I want to keep track of who is looking at Nassau County. when they're looking to construct, and then if they choose us or they do not choose us, I'm kind of keeping track of where they land and why they did not choose us. And what we're seeing is a lack of infrastructure. That's going to be a biggie right now.
There are some things you can't talk about. But are any of those prospects looking for bond finance?
Yes.
Okay.
We talked a little bit
Yes,
about
we
that, so
talked.
I'll follow up, and he's waiting for me to coordinate a
Yes, I
meeting.
knew you were.
Yes, so,
That's why we're trying to put all this
right,
together.
perfect. And I appreciate that very much.
Oh, yeah, the pictures, I'll try, like I said, get those pictures to you. I'll talk to Kelly Lilly and they're gonna send up there.
Okay, good. That'll be perfect timing because we are looking to wrap this strategic plan up. Like I said, it's in the final stages, and we did, my board did preview it just a couple weeks ago. Next month, like I said, at the end of our fiscal year, that's one of the things I'd like to have wrapped up. So that would be phenomenal.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you all very much.
Any questions? Oh, infrastructure at Crawford Diamond, how developed is that now?
It's actually looking great. I mean, the county has paved Crawford Road, and this is what the hangup is. This one company that's looking back and keeps returning back to the diamond. They have 3 different shifts and 10 trucks running in and out of there. And so, they have an entrance, and so you have to consider the residents that have been there for all these years. So with that, the workforce and the trucks entering the highway and exiting the highway, what they have come to resolve is adding additional lanes and also a merge lane, which the prospect was happy to hear that, and the county was on board and supportive of that as well. So at the moment, it's really just the paving Crawford Road. They were in the home stretch. I don't know if they completely finished it yet. Do you know, Mike?
No, they have not finished yet.
I know it's been closed off.
I know there were some issues with railroads in the past.
Yeah.
Those been kind of, no. Railroad, pretty difficult people to work with, and
Yeah, it's a little bit, yeah, that is.
and there's a big solar farm out there now, is that correct?
Over 300,000.
650 acres.
It's, yes, it is it's 300,000 solar panels out there at Crawford Diamond. FPL wrapped that up at the beginning of the year. And that's something to see. So, yeah,
Who are they providing electricity for?
they, actually, I don't think,
For themselves?
for right now, yeah,
Yeah,
right now.
storing it.
And so unfortunately, some of the smaller companies that have been looking out there, the additional 500 acres that are available, they're not large enough power users. So, FPL's turned a couple of them away, unfortunately. I know I've talked to one of our realtors here in the county, wanting to bring a company out there. And unfortunately, he was very upset, understandably, because I also thought it was a great fit. It was a small guy. And that's what you run into when we don't own the property. So with FPL being the owners of the property, they have a say on who gets that spot. It just wasn't a good fit for that. So there's been a couple companies like that.
Well, we wish you a lot of success.
Thank you.
We've talked on this board many times. We don't need more rooftops. and stuff.
Right.
We need
I think the county,
manufacturing. We need good jobs
Yeah,
for the
for
people
sure.
here.
Higher paying. That's exactly right.
Because as you know, most people leave Nassau County to work.
73%.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's one of the first studies that we
It's
did.
absolutely incredible that's happening. We need more jobs for people to stay here.
Yeah.
Get some of the traffic off the highway.
Yeah, definitely. One good thing that I'm always proud to share with these companies that are coming to look at the county is the residential development that the county has done. I mean,
Yeah.
starting from the west side of the county all the way to the island, and affordable as well. So it's, they're on top of it.
Yeah.
We also have our folks from RSMH tonight, which are, they're going to set up meetings once we award the contract, hopefully tonight. We would have meetings with someone from the board. Would that be you, or how would, I know that you're listed specifically in the.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. Commissioner Cole's on the board as well. So, but yeah, anybody, but yes, I'll be more than happy to.
Yeah, we're gonna involve people in the community with that, so.
Love it. Okay.
We definitely want your input. Any other questions? Thank
One
you
last,
very-
one last
Okay,
little
yeah,
plug. I'm sorry, guys. One of the big initiatives that are coming out of our strategic plan that you guys will be hearing about is going to be a BRE program, the Business Retention and Expansion Program. So we're really having a heavy focus on the businesses that have already been here in the county. And I think we have our launch meeting for that later this month on the 23rd. And we have got that ad hoc committee in place. So I'll start sending you guys information. The board, the monthly board reports have already been, we started putting those back out and we are wrapping that up. So you'll probably get that at the end of this week, but you guys are on the distribution list for that. Just kind of keeping you in the know of where we are with everything.
very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry, we appreciate you. All right, we've been going an hour and a half here now. I want to take a 5-minute break. meeting will come back to order. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the attorney report. Patrick?
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner Franklin just reminded me he'd like to see a written report, so I'll get back into that practice. Last few times, most of what I've dealt with has been involving pending litigation, which I wouldn't put in a report, but take it as a request and act accordingly. Starting with low hanging fruit, we've heard from the city of Fernandina Beach regarding the sewer line. They are expecting to clean and inspect the line next Monday, so they'll need access to the port. The repair work, it looks like will not start until November. But apparently their contractors are going to look at all the lines that they're working on first. And so I got an email from Andre, the utilities director of the city, that they'll need to coordinate access some point next week to get everything up and running. We also have the signed MOU with the city. You all approved it. Chairman Fullwood signed it and have a full copy of provided that to Roseanne as well.
Just Chris, just to let you know, they'll be out Monday, you said?
They're starting next Monday, so we need to coordinate something next week. Right.
They'll need to get access to the port. Okay. All right.
As you know, we've been obviously continuing to deal with the number of public records requests and everything that goes on with that, and coordinating with DOT and FDOT. I've been here 6 months, and obviously the stress that comes with persistent and repeated public records requests, tends to expose some deficiencies or inefficiencies, and so we're obviously working through those and doing our best to timely respond to those, gather the documents, etc. The litigation with Mr. Ross is still pending. It's been reassigned to Judge Daniel. I haven't heard anything in a couple of, or at least in several days. There's been some back and forth regarding Mr. Ross and the attorneys for the port operator. Nothing really involving this board or the board. I know later on the agenda is the COVID fund, so if you want to wait and talk about that all at once, I'm happy to chime in then.
Yes.
Okay. Unless there are any other questions, that's really it for me. Well, that's under litigation with the city, and so we mutually agreed with the city to reschedule our hearing on our motion to dismiss until early next year, because we had some discussions about potentially coming to an arrangement, and they understand some of the things we're dealing with, so we kind of punted that for the time being to buy us some time.
Any questions of Patrick? Okay, tonnage report, operator, Chris?
Yeah.
You go to the garage here.
So we have
Total tons are down from last month, which was 39,000, down to 20,843 rather. We had one pulp ship versus two pulp ships the previous month, and we had no KLB ships in August. There were two scheduled, but both got canceled. The KLB exporter is having difficulty securing ships. Ships are in extremely high demand. Every available ship is in utilization, and people are bidding ships to the highest bidder. It's really a crazy market. You may have read some things to that effect. So we have the KLB ship in-house today through the rest of the week. We do have another one expected the week of the 20th, as well as a pulp ship. So again, this is that seesaw on the calendar month. The third Somers Isle also missed August and came in September 1st. So that's already going to be picked up in September. So we'll probably see 35 to 40,000 tons again in September. But you notice the low was not quite as low as some of the previous lows. We're still over 20,000. One of the new things we had this month was an aggregate ship from Iceland carrying 2,000 tons of tiny, shiny, black pebbles mined from the beaches of Iceland. And it's a company that we've supported. It's their second ship. They're bagging the crystals or pellets, if you will, at Friendly Road. They've set up a bagging operation, and this material is used to line the inside of swimming pools, concrete swimming pools. It's a very high-end product. He's selling it faster than he can get it over here, and it really seems to be taking off. And so he's scheduling another ship with us before the end of the year.
You said that's coming from where?
Iceland.
Iceland.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of pebbles up there.
Yeah, well, it's the volcanic beaches. They have these black, really fine pebbles, and the pool guys love it. So we'll see another ship from him with 3,000 tons before the end of the year. And then he wants to do one per quarter at 3,000 tons per ship next year. So that's a growing business.
How does that come in?
It comes in dry bulk, just in the hold of the vessel. And so we have to get a grab or a clamshell bucket and put it on the end of the crane. And then he hires dump trucks and he drives it over to Friendly Road and dumps it in the back there where he has his bagging operation. So, yeah, I mean, we use all the facilities we have as creatively as we can. And so that's been a plus. We now have pulp coming not only from North Europe and Sweden, we also have wood pulp coming in from Brazil. And these, believe it or not, the mills like P&G and Kimberly-Clark, which makes Kleenex, they use combinations of North European pine for their pulp, and then the Brazilians use eucalyptus for their pulp. And the one has short strands and one has long strands. And you actually need a combination of both, so they really don't compete. None of this was happening at worldwide terminals. It hadn't seen pulp at the Nassau terminals for at least 10 years prior to our coming in. And now we've got both major suppliers of pulp shipping through Fernandina. The KLB, as you know, is used to go to Ecuador to build the cardboard boxes, which bring back bananas, pineapples, mangoes, plantains, any type of fresh produce you might see in your supermarket shelves. And of course, the 33 years of running container service to Somers Isle was basically sustainment for the island of Bermuda, from bottled water to construction supplies and everything under the sun. And so again, this is the impact that the workers of the port and the services that the port provides has really around the world. The wood pulp that comes through the port is distributed to more than 20 locations, some of them as far away as Ohio, Kentucky, Missouri. We've even had one go all the way up to Michigan, all by rail. I mean, we're covering out to the Midwest because of the access we have to the North American rail network. And one of the things you can see here at the bottom in August, the rail cars almost doubled from 91 last month to 182. And with the doubling of the rail cars, you actually have a drop in the daily trucks from 43 to 36. So the whole focus of increasing the rail capacity, which we have more capacity with certain improvements, is to get more and more of these trucks off the road. We have a very low percentage of trucks as a port goes. It's almost unheard of. So those are the highlights. I would point out the total tonnage year to date is just shy of 250,000 tons. We're running a 72,000 ton surplus variance over last year at this time. So we're headed for 300,000 ton minimum by the end of the year, which will be a high water mark for us. It could go significantly over that as well. Any other questions?
Chris, there's been a lot of talk, public talk, about LNG shipments. LNG shipments through the port.
The LNG shipments through the port are few and far between. There might be 2 or 3 20-foot ISO, which means International Shipping Organization approved. They're basically bottles inside the frame of a 20-foot container. They're not combustible or explosive, and they might have propane, they might have LNG. And as I said, Somersville would have the statistics on it, but the most I think we've seen is 2 or 3 a week, but there's some weeks where there's none of that.
Unless that goes to Bermuda.
Well, it's going only to Bermuda on that Somersville ship, and the empty tanks will come back at some point.
Okay. Any questions for the port operator?
I just wanted to make a comment that I know that the employees wouldn't have come tonight if you hadn't encouraged them, and I want to thank you for doing that because it was awesome.
Thanks for listening. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, next thing on the agenda. I want to talk about under new business. No, I'm sorry, unfinished business first. We'll do that. City of Fernandina Beach comp plan update. Mary?
We have, thank you to Commissioner Ross for bringing the hard copies. This was the draft that was adopted at last night's city commission meeting, which I watched online, and I know that some of you might have watched it online. They adopted a previous draft that you all have seen with only the changes that are listed here. And there was some discussion at last night's meeting about what those changes do. I would just draw your attention to 5P.01.02, which says that it's referencing the future land use map that was in effect on January 1, 2021. And that would be a static map as opposed to the future land use map as amended. I don't know that there are other examples of those types of static references where the future land use map wouldn't reflect the currently enacted uses, but that might be something for Patrick to look at. Again, we look at this as their document. It's not something we have to adopt. Right. If we're going to discuss it, I thought I would raise it. And then the compliance language is just making the language a little bit stronger from that 5P.0103. And then what was discussed in the building code section was just as the building code would change. So it's as amended by the city, which the trend is the building code that it becomes more onerous to comply with. But those were the only changes. And then there was public comment. And most of it was directed just toward the planning advisory board subcommittee and working with them. So I did inquire as to whether the city had a timeline for transmission of their comp plan. I think there are 2 readings, other 2 public readings, and then they transmit. So it's 2 readings, so they need, are there 30 days between readings?
I think the period in between is based on notice requirements. I mean, generally, it's like regular meetings, but I think it's based on notice.
Yeah, so I think there's at least one more public hearing, and then they would transmit the changes to the state for approval. So I requested the timeline on when that would happen, just so we could follow it, but I haven't an answer back.
Any questions about that? Oh. All right, let's move on to the port director. Next.
But we did circulate, I know I saw Rosanna circulate 2 drafts of port director qualifications a job description. I know you all may not have had time to look at them before tonight's meeting. The duties track what we had when we had Laura in that job, which was someone who direct reports to OPA and has the economic development functions that this board desires in order for OPA to really do all the things that its charter allows us to do and to help with citizens of Nassau County. And we could take action on those items tonight. If we wanted to advertise for that position, we could, just skim over, take a few minutes to just skim over and discuss those the qualifications for the job. And perhaps, go ahead and let Rosanna, do an ad for the position and figure out where we should post it, maybe, send it through the Reports Council. I don't have the Commissioner Cole's report on that yet. He might be able to do the liaison for us, or someone else statewide level that might be able to put up. I think it would be an interesting, and I think it would be a job that would get a lot of interest. Maybe I'm overly optimistic.
Questions? Good job. That's through funding from the state grant. We're going to have to figure out how to go about funding that. It can be. We just have to figure out the method. You have a comment?
Well, just a brief one. I know we're going to get into, what you have to remember about the COVID relief fund is it's not really a grant, it's reimbursement. So
Right.
you've got to spend the money first.
Yeah.
For everything.
Yeah.
Whether money you've already spent within a period of time, Pierce talked to DOT, I've talked to Chairman Ford has, or going forward based on your spending plan. But they're not going to give you money to spend. They're going to pay you back for money that you've spent pursuant to the plan, explain, qualified, they vet it, say, yes, we'll pay you back for this. So in a sense, it's like a credit card. And frankly, and again, we'll talk more, my discussions with DOT, I know Chairman Forward shares this. They're not ironclad on the procedures and the process because it's actually federal money that's going to them that then they're administering, passing through them. So more times than not, when I ask them a question, they have to get back to me because they're trying to figure it out too.
They are.
But what I was told last week, and this will speak, go to our discussion here in a minute, is they are very confident that the federal government is going to audit these funds. They mentioned that several times. So we just want to make sure that, it's set up the right way. We work with Pierre on the spending plan. We work with DOT. They're incredibly accessible. Every time I reach out to them, they're available. They will walk us through the process. But I don't want you to think it's a traditional grant where you just get a bunch of money and then you can decide what to do with it.
So the money really aren't guaranteed.
Correct.
Yeah.
Chairman, have you
Yes.
decided on a salary range for this position, or is that
We haven't.
still in the preliminary,
They're
just for budget purposes?
right. No, we haven't yet.
Okay.
And the reason, I don't want to do anything on this tonight, and the reason is, I've talked to a consulting company, a gentleman named David McDonald. He's with Alliance Research Consulting. He actually is the former port director at Port Manatee. And he's now with this consulting company. And we had an hour and a half conversation on the phone. The man can talk. And he's trying to sell his company, of course, but I've asked him to come to our next meeting, whenever the next meeting is, and talk to us about doing the research for us to find a port director. If we want to call it a port director, we've talked about port marketing director, someone that can not only help the port, but help us in the community and help find jobs, find business for us other than the port site. I would like to wait until we can get him here and let him talk to us about it. Whether or not we hire his company is one thing, but he's agreed to come and at least talk to us about it and tell us what he thinks we should be looking for. And we'll go from there. You have two port director job descriptions that have been presented to you. Look over those in the meantime. And then when he comes in, we can narrow that down. Yes, it's, there's a lot of things there, and I've been given names in the last couple of months about people that may be interested, so, and so there is a lot of interest. But we just have to define what the job description is, how much we can pay, how we can pay it. Because that will be the defining factor of whether or not we can do this at all.
I just wanted you to know, when you're looking at the draft I gave you, that was just when you all asked for
Right,
some
just
type
the
of
draft,
language at the budget meeting. I said I would give it to Rosanna, and in her defense, she didn't get to edit, so if you find any typos there, 100% mine.
And I've spent hours on this, just taking port director job descriptions from different places that they used, some other people have used, and kind of put it in the document. So look at all that, take out what you think, or earmark what you think is not going to work, what you think might work. And we'll come back next meeting, whenever that is, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And go from there. Is that okay with everybody? All right, very good. Port tariff, that's yours too.
Okay, so I left this on the agenda. We did have circulated the last meeting, the tugboat, the tugboat rates for the operator provided us, and I didn't know if that was something that we were going to approve as part of our overall tariff amendments, which had also been discussed previously. We don't really have a timeline for when we're going to amend the tariff. Would that be part of the strategic plan, or when would we do that?
Those tariff rates were not provided by the operator.
Tugboat?
Yeah.
Oh, who circulated those? with you?
I did.
Okay.
I got it from another source.
Are they our tugboat
Yes.
rates?
Yes. That's what I was told. So,
Are they part of our published share?
no. They're the rates that the operator gives companies.
Okay, well, I know we raised, just reviewing the minutes, and it's kind of my checklist for what we do at the next meeting. And I know in the previous meetings, we had asked Patrick to look at whether we have to publish those rates under the grant agreement.
Well, that's different. So, yeah.
So I don't know if it's just still on the list. Well, okay, so we'll just keep it on until, I know, you have a long list.
I do.
Very long.
Yes, he does.
Okay.
Okay. Relief fund information. Let's take that.
So this was something we discussed at the budget meeting as to whether we would propose specific expenditures for the ARPA funds and what we would do with that funding. And we all committed to bringing back our ideas for what we would do with the ARPA funds. So maybe we should discuss this when we get to that point in the agenda.
Either that or wait till we find out how it can be distributed and how we can spend it. We still, even talking with several people that knows about these funds, we don't know yet how they can be used, how we go about doing that, so we can find that out.
The money that's available for.
Yeah.
Well, we accepted it.
One of the things that I talked to DOT about the last time was because you can get reimbursed for things you've already spent, they suggested we start there. Specifically submitting them a draft to look at and say, look, these are some of the things we're considering requesting reimbursement for that we've already spent. So not looking forward, but looking back. And that'll help them guide us. Okay, yes, these are the things, or we need more information, or so that may be a better first task would be to go back in time and identify some expenditures that we think would qualify. And from what they talk about, anything that OPA spends should qualify, provided we give them the information they need. So rather than I know you have plans and you want to do things with RSNH and port director and things like that, but it may be a better exercise initially to look backwards and get them a draft either through Pierre or Chairman Fullwood or myself, and then have a conversation with them. Does this look good? Does that look good? What else do you need? You know, that, and I think it'll help them too, frankly.
Yes. Possibly. Yes. There's a lot of things that can be done. Pierre, you and I can work together to come up with a list of things that we can get reimbursed for from, what was it, March?
Right, so from March 3rd, I already sent you the list from March 3rd through August 7th. I sent you the list of all the OHPA spending. As I understood and from the email we received today, as I said, the funding will come to us, and obviously we have to submit the invoices and stuff like that. They're gonna put the $806,000 into the bank account. I'll just say, my reading of this grant is it needs to be spent. The plan, the first plan that we have to submit is from March 3rd to current, and then 60 days of working capital. After that, then if you meet those goals, then you submit another 60 days. So my view is spending sooner rather than later. These have to be projects that are ready to go. This wish list, I understand. I mean, even this port director, if it's going to take 90 days, 120 days to hire this port director, there's a risk that this funding, again, will they, won't they? As I said, you can't get a straight answer. There's no decision. As I said, this grant, and I think part of it is I'll say, to me, the most important part is the narrative that we put together to support why we're doing these things and how we're doing it and stuff like that. But like I said, my reading of the grant is, as I said, that first submission, which will trigger the payment of the funds. So the spending plan, we've signed the document. The spending plan is what they're waiting on. But this planning plan, as I said, is for everything from March 3rd through current, and then 60 days of working capital. So the projects, what projects do we have ready that we can fund? What things have we spent since March 3rd? How much is that total? And I'll just say, as I said, remember, even with the RSH, I come to, that's $400,000 at most. So
we could maybe authorize, the hiring of a grant administrator who works on, once the award is made. Tonight, we could decide that that's something we need, since we don't have a chief executive officer to work with a board member and you to come up with that initial presentation. If we think we need that, you said the fee is usually around 6%. Is that something you want to consider? Is that something you need?
6% of the total, right?
That's the rate that you said it could be.
that was for administration of the fund. So
Okay.
More than just a grant administrator. So
That could be a
all
lot.
we need is someone to write the reasoning to make sure that we're within the federal guidelines as far as spending these funds. Specifically, we can't use them for travel. There's not a lot of things, obviously there's some very specific things we can't use them for. My view is that if we can justify how this speeds our economic recovery, we can spend it. But there has to, there has to be some tie there that has to be made. That's where I can give you the expenses. We need someone to write that justification.
Okay. And I shared this with you at our budget meeting. Reports that have to be done every quarter. And we have the dates of those, and it goes all the way up to January 15th of 2025. So we have until then to figure out how we're going to use this money, and start using the money and do reports. And any expenditures that we have in between those times, we can recover from the grant. That's the way I think it's done.
A more
Take him out.
conservative approach says, the faster you spend it, the less issues there will be. If you
Understand.
come, this initial spending plan, and then those projects have to be in, as the way I read it, those projects have to be in process in those 60 days so that you can continue to, so that, yes, you can continue to work on those projects. You can't start a project a year and a half from now and extend.
But it doesn't have to be a project. From what I read of the grant, it can be our expenses, board expenses, organizations that we belong to, that come up every year. Attorney fees, your fee, at least for the next 3 years.
My cautious view says yes. Someone has to explain why those expenditures tied to this grant. This grant is for very specific reason, to aid in economic recovery from COVID. So how those expenditures down the line continue to aid in that recovery. If you tell me what the write-up, how we just, then yes, absolutely, I can tell you what expenses we can include. That write-up becomes an important piece of this. And I think that's where who's going to do that write-up is the key gap.
Well, I know DOT is going to work with us on that, because we
Yes.
talked to them about it, but speaking to what Pierce said, I do know they're waiting on our spending plan for already spent money.
Right.
They're waiting on that. That's the
From
trigger.
since
That's how things get started.
So we'll put that together, submit that. They said they will put the money in an account.
So yeah, so that's the information we received, the amendment you sent me today.
Yes.
So essentially, and that's part of this B2 in this agreement, says they're gonna send the full amount to us.
And we
And then
have.
obviously we have to submit the supporting documentation and all the documentation required to draw down those funds, but they're actually gonna put that into a bank account. So we will need to set up a separate bank account for that.
And those funds that we don't use through 2015 will have to be returned. 2025.
Again, that's where it gets a little
Right.
wishy-washy.
That's why we still don't know all the technicalities of this thing.
That's where,
We're working
again,
on that, believe me.
this longer term,
More
regulated, it gets, the grayer it gets. And so, that's all
We'll
I.
certainly work on
What if, to take Patrick's advice, another member of this board gets with Pierre and looks backward at all the items that would potentially qualify? Just come up with a list of what we think going backward would qualify. And then, I'm always happy to write anything, but I want you all to weigh in and approve anything to make sure that the narrative is right. What this full board.
And I'll just say, I think it's March 3rd through current, and then 60 days working capital is a plan that they're in that spreadsheet that they have. And so I'm happy to do that. I have most of the August 3rd, and I've actually done a calculation of working capital and stuff. So I'm pretty much ready, but we can review that together.
Okay, so what do we need to do now to get it together and submit it?
So
I have to write out why we're using it.
I don't know if that has to be part of the initial submission or not. If the direction is that we're gonna take all the spending for OHPA from March 3rd through current, and then 60 days of working capital, which includes our insurance and the port fees and all that stuff. I can put that together tomorrow. I actually have it together. I've already started putting it together. That's an easy exercise to do, and then we're ready to submit. As I said, if there's verbiage that needs to accompany that, which I will have to read to see when we have to submit the verbiage to support that.
So maybe we'll reschedule our next meeting if it's sooner than our next regularly scheduled meeting, then we can review it then, review and submit language.
And I think what that'll do is that'll trigger the funds coming to us. And then obviously we have to gather all the documents before we can actually use those funds, before we can actually take those funds out of the account and use them. We have to submit, we have to, all the supporting document required. So that what we're talking about here is triggering the distribution of the funds to us.
Again, we'll pass them. That sounds like a plan, but Mr. Forward, Mr. Chairman, if I can make some comments, please, and then through with the discussion. Yeah, thank you. We have provided a letter from our attorneys to. Chris, we're not going to talk about that. Well, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, and I'll make my points without the letter. The points are that under the operating agreement, we've advised, and I'm not sure if all the commissioners have seen the letter, that OPA is obligated to collaborate with National Terminals on this process. We've asked to be included in the discussions. We have some things that we want to put on the table. We haven't been invited. So tonight, I just need to point out that, firstly, under your grant agreement, the first purpose is to mitigate and respond to the negative impacts of COVID. OPA as an organization has had no negative impacts. We were maintained completely stable. All payments were made by the operator to OPA. And you have no real operating employees other than Rosanna. The impacts of COVID impacted our employees. And the second purpose of under the grant agreement is to provide working capital to lay the foundation for a strong and equitable recovery. Now, we need, and some of the categories like job training, cash transfers to employees, which further is defined to mean performance bonuses for working during COVID, retention bonuses. We need to significantly raise our entire pay scale so that we can then have starting salaries to offer to new employees at a higher level to compete against the mills and the larger ports. But we can't pay a new person more than our 30-year people and our 20-year people. So there's tens of thousands of dollars in those type of payments to the real employees of this port that just happen to fall at the operator level. We then have to be able to give job training to new employees. We've lost over 10 employees during the second half of COVID and since, while COVID's back in the third wave now, because they're being hired away by people who can pay them more. And we're talking about not $1 or $2 more, because we've already provided increases that took effect September 1st to all of our employees to try to bring up that pay scale and become more competitive. So we're losing employees. We need to elevate our pay scales, give our workers the bonuses they deserve. Some of that is classic categories, basic categories here, personal protective equipment, and then the retention bonuses and the training costs. So we plan to be submitting to you those figures as part of the spending plan for your review. We've also come to understand that, and think about it this way, the second part, expenditures by OPA as an administrative organization versus expenditures to the port to support and stabilize the current employees and grow that workforce to continue to provide more services faster. That's economic development. That's speeding the recovery in an equitable way because our employees cut across all categories of background and levels of privilege and lack of privilege. And this administration, as we know, when they use the word equitably recover, we know what that means. It's fairness, it's opportunities and ladders up and that sort of thing. So we think it's very important, and we will, hopefully you'll at least review what we have to submit and give it due consideration. It will help solve the problem of the fact that OPA just doesn't have $800,000 worth of, in our view, covered or appropriate expenses under the letter and also the purpose of this grant. And so I would hope that you would entertain that. And another example is on legal fees. Yes, legal fees under part of your operating expenses, but there must be some cap on legal fees. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees we think would violate the spirit, if not the letter, for sure, of the grant agreement and the purpose of the relief.
So that's something that I would ask that you seriously consider, and remember, the people that you heard from tonight, they really have to get some benefits. We need to stabilize our workforce, which is in the interest of OPA. We need to grow that workforce, and there has been 5 to 6% wage inflation in the last 3 or 4 months. I'm sure Pierre can collaborate this. And we just can't keep up. Our workforce and job and pay levels have been swamped. So we're talking about significant, $5 and $10 per hour increases. Make up some of it with bonuses, have money available for hiring bonuses, which we've never paid. We've never been in a situation where we've had to, basically, there's a very limited pool of qualified workers. The workers we're getting right now for jobs either have a felony conviction and they can't get a twit card, or they can't pass the drug test. So it's really challenging, and there is a threat that the port could suffer a significant setback because of, even now, we have a ship here in port, it's supposed to have 3 gangs. Since I've been here for 3.5 years, we've never had an issue providing 3 gangs. For the last 2 or 3 months, I can barely put 2 gangs together, including with our temporary day labor company, who's also lost employees. No one knows where they went. No one could seem to find them. Some of them got elevated to better paying jobs. Some of them were on benefits for a long time. Hopefully they'll come back, but a lot of the ones on benefits end up going down that drug path and they can't come back. So it really is a challenge, and we hope that you're going to work with us to develop a fair application.
We will certainly look at any considerations you have. We've never said we wouldn't do that.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Never said that.
Yeah.
When I first heard that we were gonna get this grant, one of the things I wanted to do was give every employee at least $1,000 bonus. And that's what we said.
Well, that's great. I mean, they deserve more.
But wait a minute, but we were told we could not directly do that. So the way to do that is to give that money to you to help with that expense.
Yeah.
And then you give them with maybe making sure it's earmarked for them, so they get $1,000 bonus. I think that's the start right there.
Right, well, I appreciate that.
And
We're
going to consider that, along with, we've asked you many times to help us out with more money. And you just haven't done that, and I know what the problems are. But, we can't operate our budget and do what we need to do with the money we're getting right now. So we have to take care of us first, and then there'll be extra money, I guarantee you, to go for you and your employees. And we will, right, for your employees, and that's who we're most concerned about. And believe me, I don't want that to happen. Well, and we will take that in consideration, but we're gonna deal with what we need to do.
Well, I appreciate that. And we'll, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Did you apply for PPP?
Of course,
Paycheck protection
yeah,
program?
we got a PPP in the first year,
Okay.
and that was helpful. Again,
No,
we
that's
laid
fine.
no one off, but we had additional expenses
No,
going
that's
back to
fine,
March,
that's
so
fine.
we're gonna submit those.
So most of our attorney expenses are due to litigation that you guys are, fighting back and forth with the city and this one and that one. So I
We
just
have no
want to
litigation with the city, it's only between you and the city. If you're talking about the public records request.
No.
the public records, the $50,000 grant, we're trying to get that.
The engineer lawsuit.
The engineer lawsuit, there's been quite a.
But that's into that, and we've got to pay attorney fees for that.
There's a lot of fees.
Let's look at that, that was a few $1,000s.
There's a lot of attorney fees.
A few $1,000s.
Yeah, that was on the Jets account.
A few $1,000s is a lot to us.
I know, but that was, I know, it's a lot to us too.
Yes.
So Chris, this money is earmarked to help us.
But see, here's the difference, Scott. In every other public port authority in Florida, and we always, as Fernandina, because we're so unique, we get caught where the one size fits all doesn't apply exactly to us. Cape Canaveral, Port Canaveral got $76 million or $72 million. They have 400 employees, direct employees of the port. They had to lay off. I know the fellow that runs the port personally. He had to lay off over 250 of those. He's now struggling to rehire.
Is that a cruise ship terminal?
It's 100, almost 100%.
So that's why we've got such a low amount.
No, but here's the thing, but look, be lucky that we got $800,000.
Yes.
Right,
I agree.
But I was actually fighting behind the scenes to get that money. That money wasn't just pulled out of thin air, but never mind that. The point is, here you don't have the employees at the authority level. You have them at the operator level. And clearly, on the face of the way this is written, at least a good portion of the money has to go to the employees, both for the negative impacts they dealt with and experienced, and for the ability to get that growth restarted and prime the pump, all those hiring expenses. And they need a lot more. They deserve $10,000 a piece.
So I'm not sure about the money says it's earmarked for that, but we'll discuss that. We'll take into consideration. You give us a list of things and we'll certainly take them all into consideration.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. And one last thing we would request, again, there is this obligation to collaborate under several sections of the operating agreement. New revenue actually under your favorite section.
I'm not sure you want to talk about that.
Oh, we're happy to talk about that. Because here's the
tried to talk
request.
to you about that several times.
Well, but again, each item has to be taken individually. So we're asking to collaborate and be on the calls with FDOT, because FDOT's not allowed to talk to us. They can only talk to you. And so it would be helpful if we could be on those calls, and then we could all have an agreement. We wouldn't have to think, well, maybe we think a different interpretation of what you're hearing and that sort of thing.
I would just like to take a little fact check comment that you can't simultaneously take credit for this and also advocate for withdrawal from the Florida Courts Council, claiming that they don't give us what they should for our fee. So I think that we all know where this one came from and who was advocating for it.
Well, unfortunately, Ms. Hill, you're not correct on
And
the
that's, and I
facts.
think the public comment.
We're not going to argue about that, and we're not withdrawing from Florida.
And the Florida Courts Council had nothing to do with this money, and I agree, we should withdraw.
Are you going to introduce the gentleman sitting next to you?
The gentleman sitting next to me? Sure, you know who that is. That's Mr. Charles Jefferson. That's Nassau Town Legal
He
Counsel.
represents you.
Correct.
Okay, in what capacity?
General Counsel. So the point is, FDOT developed
He
this.
was
fund.
hiding behind monitors, so I just wanted to make sure it was him.
I'd be happy to stand up and speak to the commissioners if you'd like.
No, that's all right. We're good. Okay. Where we at here? Let's see. Maintenance reports due from operator under section 2.3 of the operating agreement. Is that yours?
Right, so we've requested the report, and then what we received was a Redwell, which had some subfolders. I asked Rosanna to look into estimates for digitizing that information, but I know she's had a lot going on. And what we really are supposed to have under the operating agreement is a report. And I believe at our last meeting, Mr. Gucci committed to providing that report for the next meeting. That's actually in the minutes. So I included it here just in case it was done.
We are working on the report. Stan Harrington, the maintenance manager, has been on vacation, so when he gets back next week, I'll get an update on the timing, but we'll provide it as soon as we can. And I assume you just want, is there anything particular you want in the report? Just a narrative of the maintenance work that we've done on all of Opus equipment?
It would be a list and a memo of all of this equipment, and then understand, it's sufficient to understand, and this is just my interpretation of the operating agreement. Patrick, feel free to weigh in. But I would want a usable document that would tell us something that we could use for planning purposes. Should, look at the maintenance life of a piece of equipment and say, oh, it has this many hours, something that we could use. But there might be, other engineers or resources that would validate what that report would have in it. I can't tell you what would have in it because you have that information. We don't have that information, which is why we need a report.
Right, but you do understand the operating, the maintenance of all that equipment is our responsibility for the next 30+ years.
But we own it.
That's correct. So we report to you how and show you how we're taking such good care of the equipment.
Yep.
That's what we'll do. And the cost of it, by the way, which is very, very significant. See that as well.
Okay. Any other comments? I'm fine. All right, next item on the agenda would be the report of operating agreement.
Yes, we've kept this on the agenda because there were items that keep coming up regarding additional revenues and other terms of the operating agreement, public records requests. And I know Patrick is working on that, but I wanted to keep that on the agenda should we wish to take action to further authorize enforcement of our operating agreement. So Patrick, do you have anything you want to bring to us that you would like us to act on tonight?
So we've gone through the operating agreement and have provided internally amongst ourselves, kind of a list of the terms, and provided it to some of you to look at and provide comment. So we're, just in the process. We've had this discussion amongst the 6 of us before. I'm regularly mindful of what your resources are, what you can afford to do, what's going on that needs to be done. So as Commissioner Hill mentioned earlier, there is a list. It's not a stagnant list, it's an active list, but I'm trying to keep in mind, what you're capable of spending money on and what's a priority. And so certainly we're going through it. I speak to many of you pretty regularly about it.
That's it.
Okay, raise and PIDP application.
You skip G, just in case you didn't mean to.
And FBC reports. Sorry.
Was there anything to report from the Board of Reports Council meeting?
Quite a bit. If I'll take the opportunity, it was a rewarding and invaluable trip. It's something that's not to be dismissed as it can be handled over the telephone. There's personal and in-face meetings with others and other people. It's just increased my knowledge of what we do and what we can do. We approached the FSTED reallocations. Those were approved. There was no problems there. We are current with all of our FSTED appropriations at this point. There are some work to be done, and it needs to be done. And as long as it's followed up on within the time limits that are there, we have no issues or no problems. It was brought up that we could reduce our monies to the Florida Ports Council, and it was also brought up that we could set up payment plans if necessary. But I do not see that it's necessary for us to reduce, and I do not see that it's necessary for us to set up any sort of payment plan. Again, we're in good relations with the Florida Ports Council at this point. And all that's going to do is just continue to improve. Very invaluable and rewarding. See the tour of the Port of Panama City, which was unbelievable. They were a shipbuilding company or port during the World War II. They hundreds of ships were made there, but during the 50s it kind of went south, and they were pretty close to closing their doors. But they were able to establish some leases with some companies, and we talk about our lease with y'all for 30 years. They have a 99-year lease with a company that makes culverts. And so that company is what their bread and butter is. They also have another on-site company that does telephone wire or cable. And both those companies are just sound assets to the port there. Their port is very, very busy. And that is over the last 20 years, the result of Wayne Stubbs. He was instrumental in bringing that port back around. It's now taken over by Alex King. He's been with them for 10 years. And so he's very knowledgeable of what he's doing. And they're running them in and out. We're talking about shipment. They have gravel shipments that come in. Ship that out, but their wood pulp, they have a vacuuming system for their wood pulp. They have a warehouse that houses their wood pulp. That's probably as big as our footprint of our port, just the warehouse. So, at the Florida Ports Council, the other ports, your comments that you just made about how the port was over the last year or so, everybody else has the same report to give. They're the same boat, same situation, and they're getting through it and we're getting by. But again, it was a great and valuable time.
You forgot the best news of all. We were awarded another $215,000 in grant money towards the warehouse expansion project. And the only reason we didn't get more is because we do have a couple million of outstanding grants that we're working to either spend down or reallocate. And of course, by the time the cranes get commissioned in October, early November, the first one October 1st, second one probably the third week in October, we'll have spent down 2.5 million of our current grant balance. We've already probably spent $1 million of that down. So we'll get caught up and we'll be in a position to get more next year.
Yes. Very good position. Also met Daniel Fitzpatrick with the FDOT there, which will contact with him. And also Jay Trumbull, who is the House of Representative for District 6, and he is the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. So he and I had some discussions and some talks, and it's going to lead to maybe another chance for me to meet and talk with him again.
Thank you for that. I was very much in support of you going to represent us and staying and as a representative of this board. And it sounds like you represent as well. So thank you for making the trip and taking the time for the family to do that.
I can also tell you, we've been notified by FSTED that they are going to have a meeting with the governor in a few weeks. And I'm going to do my best to be there.
I was going to say that I will.
Or if I can't, then yes, you can definitely go. I guess we both go, but we just can't discuss anything. But we'll talk about that. Okay, anything else about FSTED and Florida Ports Council? All right, raise and PIDP application. I can never get that right. No. That's it.
These were the public records requests that were made by Commissioner Ross. Did you want to give an update on that, or?
Well, we received the PIDP, you got me going out, the PIDP grant application today directly from DOT, along with some other correspondence, so we reviewed that and responded accordingly, and we've done the same with the raise. And then somebody at DOT is out of town this week, we should get the N95 NARAD grant application next week.
We had to make FOIA requests for those.
Sorry.
We had to make Freedom of Information Act requests for those.
Yeah. How many times did we ask to be given the PIDP application? You know?
How many times did we ask them?
Port operator.
Oh, I don't know.
Rosanna, several.
Yes. I'm gonna say
How
at
was it
least,
responded to? Didn't get them, did you?
no.
We had to go to the federal government to get a copy of this application. There's been a public records request for it. It wasn't complied with. We have asked as the board to receive that application several times. I finally got it today about 2:30. I read through it as much as I could. It's 92 pages. It's a long document. But we didn't see that before it was submitted. It was not presented to us. We were told that it was going to be presented, or going to be filed for, but we didn't see it.
Our approval of the initial application was contingent on us receiving a copy before it was submitted.
Yes, and that's an amendment. And, we can't keep doing this. We don't have good understanding of what's going on. I made comments at the last meeting to the public that this was not a grant that gave us the opportunity to do things. It was a grant that gave us the opportunity to apply for specific grants in that, but that's not the way I read this today. That's not the way it was applied for. The money we received will go for that particular application and what it's said it's gonna do. And there are a lot of things in there I don't agree with. I'm sorry. And some of those things look like could be good for the port, but you're talking about closing streets. You're talking about taking property away from the Port Authority. I believe part of the new truck gates will take part of the property that the customs house is on and the lot across the street from the customs house. That's the way I looked at it, the way the map was drawn. We didn't know that. So I need to know whether you want to support this or not. The operator is asking us for a letter of support. But I don't know if I can do that. There were some things. I made a copy of some of the important stuff I thought was important. And I want to talk about those. Funding sources. OPA is named in here a lot because it's supposed to be our grant. But we did not have any input in this. We did not know what was in it. And we've gotten a lot of criticism from the public about it. And we rightly deserve it. I guess we just weren't paying attention. So I need to know what you want to do.
Well, I would like to make a motion to take a vote of no confidence in the operator. And the reason that I think that is an important step, I know that is more a, I'm sorry, I'll speak up, Commissioner. I think that, we recognize that may not have any legal effect, but given everything that has happened in the last few weeks even, and in court and through legal correspondence from the operator, he brought his attorney here tonight. And we can continue acting as if we have confidence in the operator, but we do so at our own peril and not in the best interests of those who work with us. And I think it's important for us to take that step. But I want to hear what you think.
Motion's been made to have a vote of no confidence in the port operator. Or your second.